All right, everybody. What we're going to do is we're going to fill this map of the United States in with the polling data that we can see for ourselves. We're going to go to 538 and check out state-by-state polling data and then just plug that in. So let's start with the first state, Alabama. As you can see, Trump's maintained a consistent lead over Biden. So we're going to give that a strong Republican vote. So let's go back to our map and head to Alabama. And we'll give it strong Republican. There it is. Now let's go to the next state. That's going to be Alaska. Alaska, they don't have anything, so we'll leave it. Arizona is the next state. So we've seen that Trump was actually besting Biden in March, but since then it's swapped over. Biden now maintains something of a strong lead of about 5 points over Trump. And so what we're going to say is, especially since none of the polls, even the sub-polls that constitute this average, appear to show Trump beating Biden, we're going to give it I would give this a lean for Biden. I mean, I'm in between, but here's +5 for Biden, +7 for Biden, +3 for Trump. So I'm going to give it a lean for Biden. Arizona is going to be a lean for Biden. So, sorry, there it is. We'll make that a lean. Actually, we'll make it that color. There we go. So there's a lean for Biden. Now let's go to the next state. There's Arkansas. Arkansas, they don't have any data for. So let's go to the next one, California. As we can see, Biden has maintained a strong, consistent lead over Trump. It could not be stronger. It's like a 29.4 point lead. So we're going to give California a strong Democrat. We're going to set it as a strong Democrat seat. Let's go to the next one. We're going to go to Colorado. And in Colorado, Biden has maintained a lead over Trump. That lead blew up sort of mid-April. And Biden has now maintained that lead. It's a 10.6 point lead to Biden, so we're going to say that's a strong Democrat state. So we're going to give Colorado a strong Democrat label. Let's move to the next state. Let's look at the average of the polls, and as we can see, this is Connecticut, and Biden started off pretty strong against Trump, plus 19.1% lead, and that's only expanded to a plus 21% lead over Trump. So we're going to give that to the Democrats. So Connecticut goes to the Democrats. Where is it? Is that just Connecticut 7th? Not sure here. Yep, so Connecticut goes to the Democrats. We might have to resolve some of this later, but there we go. Delaware. Delaware, they don't have any polling for, bizarrely. Florida, Trump has basically been neck and neck with Biden, but what's happened is that the polls have started to diverge. Biden now maintains a sort of 7-point lead over Trump, but that's converged a little bit. Even over here, that lead was dwindling to about a 2% lead, but it's now back to about a 3% lead, 2.7% lead. But if we look over here, we see Biden neck and neck with Trump. Here we see a poll, Marist College poll, giving Trump a +1, Biden +6, but a lot of Trumps in there. So, I mean, what I would say with this one is, especially given we've got more polls, that isn't particularly scientific, in terms of number of polls, but we do have more polls, honestly, showing Trump leading than Biden. So I would give this, I would give it a toss-up status. What is that? That's Florida, right? That is a toss-up. So there we go. We'll just leave it as it is. Next state, Georgia. With the Georgia polls, very tight. Trump has maintained a consistent lead over Biden, which has been narrowing at times. I think it inverted even over here. Nope, just narrowed. Actually, Biden was exactly the same as Trump. But yeah, Biden sort of over here was actually ahead of Trump. But as it stands, Trump has a plus 1.5% lead. But seeing as all the polls are showing Trump having that lead, all the recent polls that we can see anyway, we're going to give it a tilt Republican for Georgia. So Georgia is going to tilt Republican. There it is. Now let's go to the next state. We'll go to Hawaii. Hawaii has no polling data, so let's go to Idaho. Idaho appears to have no polling data. Indiana. Alright, so Indiana, Trump's maintained a consistent lead over Biden, and that lead has widened over time, I would say. being at 14.2%, given that it was only at around 12 back then. So that would be a strong Republican state. So we're going to give Indiana to the Republicans. There it is. Let's go to the next state. Iowa. There we go. Felt like we've already done this one, but here's Trump maintaining a lead over Biden. That lead then narrows, sort of June, to where Biden's neck and neck with Trump, sometimes even maybe above Trump. But then it's widened again to a very, very small funnel, where Trump maintains a 1.6 percentage point lead over Biden. But given that all the polls show Trump to be in the lead, in fact, there's not even a single poll that shows Biden to be in the lead, we will give this a tilt for Trump. So we're going to give Iowa a tilt for Trump. Sorry, was that Iowa? Yeah, Iowa. Sorry, so Iowa is going to be a tilt for Trump, and I think it was Indiana, actually, that we were supposed to... Let's just go back a little bit. Where were we? Idaho, right. So, where were we? Indiana, yeah. So it's Indiana that was strongly for Trump. So we'll go in and we'll put Indiana strongly for Trump, sorry. Right. Let's go to the next state. Kansas. Kansas, Trump has maintained a pretty strong lead right the way through. Started around an 8% lead and is now around 9%. So that's going to be a strong Republican state. So we're going to give Kansas to the Republicans. So there we are. And Kansas goes Republican. Let's go to the next state. Kentucky. So Kentucky Trump started out with around a 16% lead over Biden. That lead's been maintained, and it's grown to, well, it stayed the same actually at around 16%. Pretty stable, very stable. We can conclude that that is a strong Republican state. So we're going to go to Kentucky over here, and we are going to give that a Republican label. There we go. Let's go to the next state. Fill it in. Louisiana. There is no poll data that we can find for Louisiana as per the site. But if we go to Maine, Biden started off with around 9.7% lead. That lead widened at one point to around 15% in favor of Biden. That's narrowed. It's around now 10% in favor of Biden. So it started at 9, moved to about 10 or 11 even. Pretty steady. Well, we can conclude that Maine is indeed a Democrat state. So we're going to hit our Democrat label and give that to Maine. Oops, sorry. There it is. Maine's a Democrat state. All right, next one. Maryland. Maryland we don't have polling data for. God knows why, but we don't. Now Mass. In Massachusetts, Biden started off with a 27% lead, and that has since grown to a 34% lead. It could not be a bigger, stronger, more stable lead, in my opinion. So Massachusetts is going to be a Democrat state. So let's go over here. Let's hit Democrat. And let's go to Mass. Where's Mass? There it is. Hope that's all of Mass. Looks like it. So Massachusetts goes Democrat. Let's go to the next state. Michigan. So Michigan started off with a plus 2.8% in favor of Biden back in March, but it's since grown to about a plus 7.7% lead in favor of Biden. And as we can see, practically all the polling data shows that Biden is going to win. Well, the two pieces of polling data that we can see does show Biden in a strong lead. So we're going to say that Michigan is going to go Democrat. Let's hit Democrat. And let's give it a strong Democrat, Michigan. There we go. Next state. Minnesota. Minnesota, the place where some of the recent Black Lives Matter issues happened. Started off with a 4.6% lead in favor of Biden. That lead then blew up in sort of June and went to a 10% lead, but it's since narrowed to around a 5% lead, which has stayed pretty stable. Biden sitting at around 6% lead in Minnesota. So what we're going to say is that's a strong Democrat state, particularly because Trump's never really contested him. Even in the polls, even in the sub-poll data, even the strongest polls don't show Trump besting Biden or getting more than 50% of the vote anyway. So what we're going to say is that Minnesota goes Democrat. There's Minnesota, and it goes Democrat. There we go. Let's go to the next state and look at that poll data. So here's Mississippi. Trump starts off with a 15.5% lead, and that lead narrows over time. He's now sitting around a 12.3% lead over Biden. And so from what we can see from the poll data, very, very clear margin for Trump. So we're going to say Mississippi is a red state, and Mississippi is going to go for the Republicans. There we go. Let's go to the next state. Missouri. So Missouri started off with Trump at an 8.5% lead over Biden. That lead narrowed at a particular moment in time in July to a mere 2.4% lead, but has since re-expanded to about a 6.5% lead. And given that only this Biden poll appears to show Biden anywhere near 50%, we're going to go ahead and say that Missouri is a strong red state and give Missouri to the Republicans. So Missouri goes to the Republicans. Let's go to the next state. Montana. So Montana started off with a whopping 22.3% lead for the Republicans, but that lead broke down in May to a 12.9% lead for the Republicans, and that's continued to narrow, but the Republicans are sitting on an 8.3% lead, and so what we're going to say is that Montana goes strongly for the Republican Party. I think that's fairly safe to say. If you look at the blue dots that represent the individual polls for Biden, they seem to agree with that. So Montana is going to go Republican. There's Montana, and it goes Republican. So next one, Nebraska. So Nebraska doesn't have any poll data, so we'll go forward to Nevada. And Nevada started out with a plus 4.5% for Biden. That narrowed in May to a plus 4.4% for Biden, re-expanded to a plus 8.8% for Biden, but has since sort of normalized in the middle at a plus 6.4% for Biden. And we don't see any Trump polls even close to approaching 50%, though Biden's not even approaching 50% either, probably because there's a independent in that race, but because this doesn't add up to 100. But what we're going to say is this is strong Democrat, and we're going to give Nevada to the Democrats, which is bizarre because I've seen models which put Nevada sort of tilt or lean, but we're going to go ahead and give Nevada a strong Democrat state coloring here. There we go. Nevada goes Democrat. And let's go to the next state. New Hampshire. So New Hampshire starts with the Biden at plus 1.75%, but Biden since expanded his lead considerably to plus 8.2%. And let's see, can we get any? We don't get anything useful for this election because these are old results, but we're going to go ahead and give New Hampshire to the Democrats. So let's get our Democrat colors going. Let's find New Hampshire here. There it is. And New Hampshire goes for the Democrats. So hopefully that should do the trick there. Let's go to the next state. New Jersey. New Jersey started with a 17% lead for Biden over Trump, which has since expanded to 20% lead for Biden over Trump. So New Jersey is a strong Democrat state. The poll results confirm that. So we're going to give New Jersey to the Democrats. There it is. New Jersey goes for the Democrats. There we go. Next one. New Mexico. New Mexico. Biden starts at a 7.6%, 7.4% lead, but that lead has widened at some points to 14%, but currently it sits around a 13% lead. So we can safely conclude that New Mexico is a strong Democrat state. So we'll give New Mexico to the Democrats. Next, New York. Donald Trump's home state. Biden started off with a plus 18.5% lead, which expanded to a plus 29% lead in May. But that's since, actually, what was it, 29? Well, it's at 27 now. We have a 27% lead for Biden. That's very, very strongly in favor of Biden. So New York will go to the Democrats. New York State. There it is. Let's go to the next state. North Carolina, a toss-up. Biden sits at plus 2.5% back in March, and that lead had at one point contracted to the point where Biden and Trump were neck and neck, but it's since expanded, and Biden is sitting at plus 1.6% over Trump. But I would say, given that it contracted here to practically neck and neck and here to practically neck and neck, that this poll tends to exhibit sort of a little bit of it's not Biden isn't smoothly ahead of Trump. It tends to invert at times, and so that's a little bit unsafe to call as a strong Democrat state. But you do have to go back to November to find Trump in the lead at all, and so Biden's been pretty strongly in the lead here. So I would give it a tilt, Democrat, North Carolina. So let's hit Democrat over here, go to North Carolina, and reduce that to a tilt for the Democrats. So let's go back, go to the next state. North Dakota. North Dakota doesn't have any polling data that we can find here. Ohio. Ohio started at plus 3.3% for the Democrats, but has since moved to around plus 0.9% for the Republicans, though it's been neck and neck for some time through August, and starting in September, that lead has gone to about 1%. If we look at the polling data, it's not very good actually. Some old polls here, but what I would say is this is definitely not safe for either of them, and I would not give this to the Republicans. I might give it a tilt Republican, but it is very, very close. I mean, right through this period, the Democrats were sort of ahead of Trump, and only recently has that lead expanded somewhat. I mean, here it's a good 2% lead for Trump, but here it's at around 0.9%. So we'll give it a tilt. Ohio will tilt Republican. There we go. Ohio is tilting Republican. Let's keep going. Oklahoma. Oklahoma started at a strong 28.4% lead for the Republicans, and that lead has been maintained. It's at 23% right now, so we'll give Oklahoma to the Republican Party. Oklahoma goes to the Republicans. Right, next state. Oregon. Oregon we don't have any polling data for. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is where Biden was born, of course. Starts off with a plus 2.6% lead for Biden. That lead expands to around 5.6%, up to about 8.1%, and has since contracted to about 5.1%. So Biden maintains about a 5.1% lead over Trump. All the polling that we can see shows Biden strongly in the lead. We can even click more polls here. Begs the question, if there's so many polls for Pennsylvania, why are there whole states with absolutely no polls on this website? This website, of course, is dedicated to collecting this sort of stuff, so it's a bit shocking that half the states don't have anything. But what we can say is that since about June 25th, 2020, Biden has been strongly between plus 10 and plus 1. All the polling data has been strongly in favor of Biden. So we will give this, I think, a lean to Biden. It is close at 5.1%. And I think that, well, would you give this, I mean, look at that one poll there where the Republicans did actually beat the Democrats on that day. As well as there, very, very, very close. There, there's a red dot just above the blue dot. There's a red dot above the blue dot. So I wouldn't say this is in the bag for the Democrats. It's about as close as possible to being in the bag. But I do worry with this state. I believe in the last election, the 2016 election, Pennsylvania almost went to the Republicans, or actually it was very, very, very close. And I remember the rural areas voted all Republican, urban areas voted Democrat. It's incredibly close. So I wouldn't call this strongly in favor of the Democrats. But I would say maybe lean Democrat is what I would say with Pennsylvania. So let's go in there and reduce that to a lean. There it is. Leans Democrat. Next state. South Carolina. South Carolina starts off with Trump at plus 12.7%. And that lead narrows, and now Trump's sitting around plus 6.7% over Biden. There's no polling that shows Biden besting Trump. So we'll give South Carolina at 6.7% over to the Republicans. South Carolina will be a Republican state, according to our models here. There we go. South Carolina's now labeled Republican. Let's go to the next state, Tennessee. Starts off with a 16.7% lead for Trump. That lead has since contracted considerably, but then re-expanded. It's sitting around a 12.1% lead for Trump, and there's really no polls that I can see that kind of muddy the waters here. So we're going to give Tennessee over to the Republicans. So Republican, Tennessee, red state. All right, next one, Texas. Now this is a close race. 3.9% started off for Trump over Biden, closed over here to neck and neck. Biden, I think, was never really ahead, which is shocking, given that it's Texas. Oh, there it is. Biden is now ahead, and in Texas has very strong urban centers, which are sort of places where the Democrats get a lot of support, and it's neck and neck. Trump is 0.8% ahead at this stage. The polls that we can see show Trump ahead, but I would give this a tilt Republican because it was actually Democrat over here, and this is really about as neck and neck as it gets at a 0.8% lead. I mean, just a couple days ago, the lead was reduced to something like 0.5, if that. So we're gonna say that Texas is tilt Republican. There it is, Texas tilts Republican. Well, let's continue on through the states. Utah. So Utah started off with a 19.3% lead for Trump. That lead narrowed to around a 10% lead, 7.8% lead over here, and Trump's current lead is about 11.5%. I don't see any individual polls which muddy those waters. That's a pretty clear lead for the Republicans, so we're going to give Utah over to the Republicans. There it is. Next state. Virginia. Virginia started with Biden at about a 4.7% lead in March, and that lead has since expanded all the way to 11%, and Biden's currently sitting on a nice 10.8% lead over Trump in Virginia. So we're going to go ahead and give Virginia to the Democratic Party. There we go. Virginia goes strongly for the Democratic Party. I think that's safe to conclude. Washington, a very blue state all the time. So here it is, plus 22.3% for Biden. That lead had narrowed to about 20% lead for Biden, and has since grown to about 26.2% lead for Biden. Given that the polls are that far away, literally 12 points away from the top Trump poll to the bottom Biden poll, that's very, very safely in the hands of the Democrats. So we're going to go ahead and give Washington over to the Democrats. I believe that's D.C. Oh, is that Washington State? Sorry, Washington State. Let's get D.C. out of the way. It's Washington State. Right. So Washington goes for the Democrats. West Virginia. West Virginia we don't have any polling data for. Wisconsin. Wisconsin started with Trump at a 1% lead over Biden. Very, very muddy. Then they were neck and neck. They continued neck and neck all the way through April. Biden started picking up steam. The lead started increasing from 4 to 5 to 8%, and has sort of stagnated around there. We're currently sitting the Democrats are currently sitting on a 6.9% lead against Trump today, and the polling data is generally, of what we can see, is in favor of Biden. And so what I would say is at a 7.1% lead, that is a clear Democrat state. So we're going to go ahead and hand Wisconsin over to the Democrats, which is one of the Rust Belt states. So it's very crucial that the Democrats grab the Rust Belt states if they want to win the election, because that is Trump's foothold in the middle of the map, where if he wins those states, then the election goes over to the Republicans. But we can safely say, I think, that Wisconsin is strongly in Democrat hands. And so those are all the states here that we can fill in. So let's take a look at our final map. Our final map has the Democrats sitting at around 205 votes plus 31. So that's 236 plus 15. So that's 246 plus 5. That's 251 votes. Very close to the 270 you need. And the Republicans are sitting at 86 plus 44. That's 90 plus 40. 130. And then that's 164. So 164 to their 250, whatever it was. So 205 plus 31, 235, 36 plus 10, 46 plus 5, 51, 251. So that's what we're sitting at. And if you guys want to fill this in terms of what you think about these states where we didn't have polling data yourselves, all you have to do is pause the video, go through the polls yourself, think about where you'd hand these states off to, and then just add those numbers in. So if you think Wyoming's going to go Democrat, then you add 3 in for the Democrats here. If you think, I don't know, South Dakota's going to go Republican, you add 3 in for the Republicans. If you think Florida's going to go Democrat, then that's 29 for the Democrats. Equally, if that goes for Republicans, that's 29 for the Republicans. But based on the polling data, I think if you take the polls as they are, you don't feel that there's any need to adjust them, then this, you would safely conclude, is what the polls in aggregate are very clearly showing for the states in question that we've filled in. And, I'd like to apologize for the fact that 538 didn't have polls for some of the states, but this is about as far as we can get. We did it ourselves, so we have this strong sense that, okay, we've seen the data, we can actually agree with the data, and we know that at least with the states that we're looking at, this is where they sit. There are a few states in question, but what we can see already is, just from what we know in terms of the lean plus the definite Democrat states, the Democrats are very, very close to that 270 line, whereas the Republicans, if you add that in, are much further away from that 270 line. And I want to encourage you yourselves to go in there and quickly allocate these states. Maybe if you don't want to go through the polls, just do it in your head, what you think is going to happen, allocate those states, add it in, and then go and talk to people about what you think is going to happen in this election. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a follow, and thanks for watching.